Hey guys, it's James and I wanted to compare QYLG versus XYLG on my fund versus fund future value calculator. This calculator takes into account the fund share price, the dividend yield, the expense ratio, their current values, and then I also can play around with a few of the growth and contribution items such as monthly addition, their CAGR growth rate or annual growth rate, would I like to reinvest dividends or would I not like to reinvest dividends? How's that going to look over the course of 10 years? And then play around with the initial deposit numbers and see what we will get as a comparison for these two funds, see what type of income we would be looking at if we had a large portfolio, and change these CAGR numbers around to see what we would get. And I would also like to take a look at the very short history of these two funds together. We'll take a look at this on portfoliovisualizer.com, where we take QYLG at 100% and XYLG at 100% and see how they perform over the course of the last 17 months. Let's head over to QYLG and XYLG's fund page to be able to pull a few values for our calculator. Few things I'd like to point out here. The inception date was September 2020, expense ratio was 0.6, and they claim their 12-month trailing yield is 11.28%, but we'll take a closer look at this on Seeking Alpha. Over on XYLG's page, they actually have the same inception date as QYLG. Both of these funds came out at the same time, and we're sitting around 17 months of these funds being active, same expense ratios, and the 12-month trailing yield for XYLG is stated to be 8%, with the most recent distribution yield of 6.5%. This is QYLG's Seeking Alpha page. If you take a look at the max, you can see that Seeking Alpha's data starts around September of 2020. It started to hold its own until about December, and then in January it has come down to $28.36. We will play around with the CAGR number just to have a few scenarios of what this fund would look like in the next 1 to 10 years. I do want to come over to their dividend yield and point this out. When the fund began, it began around September of 2020. So after a year, we finally came to a total overall 12-month yield of about 5.2%. However, in December 2021, they had a massive dividend payout. Seeking Alpha is claiming their dividend payout has been about 11% since then, or their 12-month trailing yield has been about 11% because of that massive dividend. We come over to the dividend history and we can see that $1.60 was their dividend payout in the month of December. And again, this fund is fairly new, so it only had the year of 2021 to be able to have 12 dividend payouts, with the last one being $1.60. And then the month of January in 2022 fell back to the same monthly dividend payout, equal to about the average monthly payout for the year of from January to November in 2021. Over on XYLG's page, we'll go over to max to try to determine our CAGR numbers. The starting value of about $25.14, with the ending value being somewhere between $32 and $29 and $32 to be able to determine a straight line or a CAGR number. Same thing with XYLD. Regarding their dividend payouts, their dividend yield over the course of 12 months, it started to climb up, and Seeking Alpha settled around, for XYLG, around 4.2% until that December payout for XYLG, and then the trailing 12-month trailing yield for XYLG is sitting at around 7 to 8%. So we'll play around with both of those numbers in our calculator. Take a look at the dividend history. We can see that $1.10 for XYLG, but a more consistent average yield of about 10 to 13 cents over the course of 2021. We're over here on Portfolio Visualizer. This shows the history from the fund inception dates. We're going to do our time period on a month-to-month basis, not on a year-to-year. We're going to start with $10,000. We're going to have no cash invested. We're going to have no rebalancing, no leverage. We're going to have dividends reinvested and then change it and see what we get. And we'd like to see our dividends or our payouts or display our income. QYLG 100%, XYLG 100% of portfolio 2. analyzed the portfolios, and according to the history of these two funds, their CAGR numbers are very close with dividends reinvested, close to about 25 to 26%. And from October 2020 all the way to February of 2022, they are very close in value when dividends are reinvested, XYLG being higher than QYLG. And the portfolio incomes in 2020, there was only 3 months of dividend payouts. So you have XYLG and QYLG very close. However, in 2021, QYLG had almost $1,000 more in dividend payouts for the year of 2021. And remember, this is with a $10,000 contribution. If we change this to dividends not reinvested and we check the history of these funds, what would we have gotten if we invested $10,000 in October of 2020? The CAGR numbers come down quite significantly. If you recall, QYLG was sitting at 25%. With dividends reinvested, it is now 10%. And XYLG was sitting at 26%. With dividends reinvested, it is now 18%. So after about 17 months, XYLG would have outperformed QYLG without dividends reinvested. We come down to the income, and it is very similar as it was with dividends reinvested. And we come over to the calculator to determine the future value of these funds with the information that we received, to see if it would be a worthwhile investment in either one of these funds. So here's the NAV price for these funds. We also, if you recall, the dividend yield, we're going to play around with this, but we're going to go with the more conservative number. If you recall, QYLG was sitting at 5.2% before that large December 2021 payout, and XYLG was sitting around 4.2% dividend yield. If you invested today, you are probably going to be receiving these type of yields starting today over the next 12 months. And then the annual growth rate. So if you develop the CAGR numbers for QYLG and XYLG, if you remember the starting value and the ending value for these different funds. So if you recall over on Seeking Alpha, to be able to find these numbers, if you come back over to Seeking Alpha on their max view for QYLG, the fund started around $26.80, and they are saying as of today, it is $28.36. So if we input those numbers of 26 and 28 over a 17-month period, that is about a 5.37% CAGR. So we'll go ahead and use that. For XYLG, we come over to Seeking Alpha's data, and for the max view, we can see $25 at the same time period that QYLG was reading 26. XYLG was reading 25, and today XYLG is reading 29.25. So we'll go from 25 to 29, and that gives us a CAGR of about 11% over a 17-month period. So 11.05. We will go ahead and see what we would get with dividends reinvested, and then we'll take a look at without dividends reinvested. The people that are going to be owning these funds are people interested in receiving income with a little bit of growth. So if you have $10,000 sitting in your portfolio, I probably would invest in the funds that are going to give you the most absolute growth overall. And usually that is going to be your broad market funds like VTI, VOO, and VT-SAX, buying the entire stock market. However, for these funds, their objective is to produce an income. So to be able to produce an income, you're probably looking at about a 6-digit portfolio. So let's say we had $300,000 in our portfolio. It looks like we will be getting growth with dividends reinvested. We would go from $300,000 to about $793,000 for QYLG and $1.2 million for XYLG if they continued their consistent growth from as they have in the past 17 months. And then you can see as XYLG's fund continues to outperform QYLG, eventually the takeover of the dividend, XYLG's dividend would start to pay out a little bit more over the course of 10 years. However, if we take a look at not reinvesting dividends, which is probably true for the most case, if you had a $300,000 investment in either one of these funds, your funds would still grow And at year one, you would get paid $15,000 for QYLG and $12,000 for XYLG, which is pretty decent for a fund that pays you a decent dividend that is going to give you some decent growth as well. And then you can see very similar due to the growth rate of XYLG at 11% compared to 5% for QYLG. Eventually, XYLG's fund price is going to continue to outperform QYLG, which would give them an advantage on a higher dividend payout, even though the dividend yield is slightly lower. Let's back off on the CAGR numbers here. If you recall, 2021 was a very, very good year for the stock market. The average growth rate for the S&P 500 is about 8%, and the growth in 2021 for the S&P 500, I believe, was in the 20 to 30% range. So let's take this number and divide it by 3, which would give us a 4%, and the NASDAQ, let's go ahead and divide this by 3 as well and give us a 2% annual growth rate. With these current dividend yields, this is what you would be looking at over the course of 10 years. QYLG and XYLG would grow accordingly with these CAGR numbers. However, if you reinvested the dividends, they would grow such as this. Let's go ahead and change these dividend yields to the higher dividend yield. Let's say we do expect a fairly large dividend payout in the month of December every year. That means QYLG, we would bump that up to closer to a 11%, and XYLG was close to 8% dividend yield for a trailing 12-month yield. And here is what we would be sitting at. After 1 year with a $300,000 investment, you would receive QYLG $33 in dividends and XYLG $24,000 in dividends. If you guys would like to play around with this calculator, I offer it on my Patreon. Over here is just a simple generic dividend calculator. None of these numbers change. It just shows you, due to the current dividend yield input right here, if you wanted $5,000 a month in dividends, you would need a portfolio size for QYLG $545,000 and $750,000 with XYLG to be able to be paid $5,000 a month. And in annual dividends, if you wanted $50,000 a year, you would need this much in QYLG and this much in XYLG. If you guys enjoyed that, head down into the comments and let me know what you thought. And if you would like to see another analysis between 2 different income funds or 2 different growth funds, let me know. And with that, thanks for watching.